Have you ever noticed how what we often call resistance in schools can actually be a sign of something deeper? A signal of unmet needs, a desire to be understood, or even a passion for doing what's best for students?
We all understand the positive impact and drive that comes from being part of an effective team. When teams are less than effective, lack of productivity, frustration, and disengagement take over.
Intentional and purposeful focus on building a culture of collaboration is the secret for leaders striving to make a difference.
In building a culture of collaboration, we share simple tips, ideas, and strategies to take your organization's collaborative efforts to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Building a Culture of Collaboration. I'm Curtis Houston, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Lorna Hewson. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Becca Silver, founder of the Whole Educator and creator of the Catalyst Mindsets framework. Becca began her career as a classroom teacher and instructional coach, and through her own experiences became deeply curious about what truly drives teacher resistance and growth. Her work now helps schools and district leaders move beyond compliance to build trust, connection, and authentic commitment among staff.
In this conversation, we'll explore how leaders and coaches can honor teachers' humanity, uncover the root causes of resistance, and use the catalyst mindsets to foster genuine collaboration and growth within school teams. So, welcome, Becca. So great to have you
Welcome.
here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and to be here with you today.
So, Becca, we talked in that intro about your own experience as classroom teacher, instructional coach, and then to where you're at now. But I know we left a lot of gaps. Can you kind of fill in your journey that's brought you to us here today?
Sure. So I was a teacher for 10 years, and when I started teaching, and probably throughout my teaching career, I changed schools every 2 or 3 years, and I changed grade levels almost every year. And so I have a wide range of grade level experience as a teacher. And when I would change schools, one of the things I experienced myself was resistance to change. I,
Yeah.
as a teacher, resisted change for lots of different reasons. And it wasn't because I didn't care. It was actually because I cared
Mm.
deeply. So when I became an instructional coach, I did the typical thing that coaches do where it's like, let me tell you how I did it in the classroom. And I started experiencing resistance.
Mm.
And I was like, ooh, right, this feels familiar, but on the other end. And I started to get curious. What
Yeah,
is causing resistance to change?
yeah.
So when I started the Whole Educator and I started working with coaches and leaders, I developed this framework, understanding and helping to diagnose what's going on here so we can
Mm.
intentionally support educators through resistance to change. And so we can understand the humanity around it. And so
Yeah.
the type of coaching that I do in the Whole Educator is a human-centered approach.
Mm.
We get things done through people's humanity and not around it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and we are big believers that we have to get to root causes and
Hmm.
understand
Hmm.
that people care a lot, which is why we ask hard questions and we challenge each
Hmm.
other.
Hmm.
And we may not be asking those hard questions because we're resisting that change. We're
Hmm.
trying to understand it that much deeper.
Well, and we
Exactly.
all are experiencing change all the time. It's part
Absolutely.
of life. So,
Hmm.
how do you manage and negotiate that? So, Becca, many leaders and coaches encounter resistance from teachers at some point or other. But from your perspective, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that leaders have about that resistance? And what's really going on under the surface?
I love this question. So, I want us to think about the context of school, how we do school.
Mm.
And one of the great things I like to share is the way we do school isn't the only way.
Yeah.
We kind of forget there's other ways of doing school. There's infinite ways of doing school, right? But the way we do school, the structure of how we do school is we interview teachers at our schools, right? So they come in, and one of the things that we want our teachers to be able to do is critically think, right? So
Mm.
we hire critical thinkers. We want them to pivot if things aren't going well in the classroom. We want them to differentiate for all the different learning needs in their classroom, right? We want them to do all these problem solving and critical thinking skills. And yet, when a change is decided on most of the time. Someone in a leadership position, either in the district or in the school, has made a decision.
Yeah.
And then our beautiful critical thinkers are asked to comply for change they didn't choose.
Mhm.
So it just makes sense.
It just makes sense. It actually makes sense. Like, oh, maybe that grappling. And I like to give the distinction between compliance and engagement. And what we don't realize is when we get upset around resistance to change, what we're a hidden agenda, right? We don't even realize we're wanting compliance, right?
Yeah.
And it's like just do it, right? Because us as leaders, we're busy. We're really busy. And we're
Mhm.
like dealing with angry parents, right? We're dealing with all sorts of stuff. And we're like, I just need you to implement this thing, right? And in that busyness and in that kind of like please just implement the change, right, we're kind of it's hidden from us, but we're kind of wanting compliance. And when we want engagement, which is I know what our leaders actually want, sometimes engagement with the change looks like resistance, that grappling, like do I believe in this change, do I not, what do you know, do I think I can be successful, do I not, right? All that grappling can look like resistance.
Yeah, and you know what? The words that come to my mind as you were talking about the compliance piece and how frustrating that can be for leaders, but because we're always seeking the nebulous buy-in.
I was
Yes.
actually just going to say that of how many leaders do we have that how do I get everyone to buy in
Yeah.
Buy
to
in.
this? And we've reached a place of don't strive for buy-in, strive
Buy
for
in.
developing that critical mass, that group
Yes.
that understand and are working with, and then working with that group to help make that tipping point for your
Yes.
staff team. You're not trying to sell people on to get them
Yes.
to buy
Well,
in,
and
is what I think.
like you said, Becca, it is about, every leader wants engagement. And that's a much better way to think about it. When you think about engagement, you think about how do we bring people together in those collaborative conversations to be able to move things forward.
That's exactly it.
So, Becca, I would love to know more about this Catalyst Mindsets framework. You talk about value, ownership, belonging, success, and growth. Can you walk us through how these mindsets help leaders and coaches better understand and support the people they work with?
Mhm.
Here's the beautiful thing about the mindsets. It can be used as a diagnostic tool for what's going on with resistance to change. It is a framework that can be used diagnostically. So if we're just going to back up here and zoom out, what is underneath? What's the root cause of resistance to change? It's two words, unmet needs. We can
Yeah.
boil it down. Now, it's simple but not easy, I like to
Yeah.
say. Unmet needs. So the next question is, if unmet needs are at the root cause of resistance to change, how do we figure out what those unmet needs are? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's pretty obvious, and sometimes it is hidden underneath. So I
Yes.
created this framework pulled from research from the mindset people. This is like the growth mindset people, by the way, fun fact, kept doing research after
Mhm.
Carol Dweck wrote her
Yeah.
wonderful book, Mindset. They're like, hey, there's actually more mindsets that we need. But we were all caught up in the swirl of growth mindset. I know I certainly was as a teacher and didn't pay attention, right? And so I'm here, I put all this research together into this framework. And so what we can do is ask ourselves what unmet needs do they have? And it's five mindsets. Are they, and mindsets, by the way, I like to say this, mindsets are simply beliefs. They're
Mhm.
not resilience, they're not hard work, they're not praising effort. Those are behaviors that can cause or be an outcome from mindsets.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's mindsets are not any of those. Mindsets are beliefs. So the five mindsets are growth mindset's one of them. I believe I can improve.
Mhm.
Success mindset, I believe I can be successful, which is self efficacy.
Mhm.
Value mindset, which is one of the most common unsupported mindsets in schools, which is I believe this has value for me, value, purpose, meaning, relevance.
Mhm.
Belonging mindset, I believe and I feel I belong here. And there's a bunch of little nuances in belonging.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
trust and connection, psychological safety,
Yeah.
and ownership mindset, which is I believe that I can change things by being responsible. And I love that you were talking about buy-in earlier, because one of the things I often say, because we talk about buy-in a lot, and I believe I love to attach meaning to how we're already thinking, right? So I like to say we need to go beyond buy-in.
Yeah.
And what we're going towards, the next step is ownership.
Mhm.
And a distinction between buy-in and ownership is who's at the table when making decisions and implementing change.
Right.
So buy-in, teachers aren't at the table. Someone else made a choice. I'm going to get you to want my choice,
Yeah.
Hmm.
right? Ownership, there is a sense of agency. That is the distinction between the two. And then there's internal agency. I believe inside of me that I can make changes. I have the internal capabilities. And there's externally. So I really played with, am I going to make agency a mindset? Is there going to be agency mindset? No, because there is an actual reality where leaders actually give agency or not, right? Environmentally,
Hmm.
you as teachers are actually allowed to do things, or you're not.
Hmm.
Oh, I love it. So
Hmm.
talk to me, why catalyst? What do you mean when you say
Mm.
catalyst mindsets?
Ooh, I played with the names of this, right? Because
Yeah.
this is I was like, what am I going to call these things? Um, I settled on catalyst because mindsets don't fix things. It's not, that's not the end of the road. It's the beginning of the road. It gets us unstuck, right? If you think about
Mhm.
a car, right, at a red light, you're stopped, and then the light turns green and you can go, right? There's a catalyst, you press the gas, right? And you
Yeah.
go. And so these mindsets aren't the only thing that we need. It's a place to get us going again. It's
Um,
the spark.
yeah.
And I would assume then, Becca, that we often see that there, and we've talked with a lot of people around this collaboration work, and they say if you want to effectively support collaboration in your organization, you have to look at yourself first.
Hmm.
And how are
100%.
you contributing to that? So I imagine that there is, through these mindsets, self-reflection, but then I would also extend the thinking, I think, that
Mhm.
there would be organizational
Mhm. Oh yes.
mindsets
Mindsets.
that
Mhm.
come into play as well. Can you
Hmm.
Yeah,
speak to that?
for sure. Well, the beautiful thing about the Catalyst mindsets is you can use it to diagnose and understand your culture.
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
We constantly hear the question, what leadership books are people reading? Can anyone suggest a great book focused on strengthening teams and building robust cultures of collaboration?
Well, we've got you covered. We've compiled a list of 102 must reads for school leaders directly from our bookshelves. No AI generated list here. There are so many authors who have guided our work in collaborative response and continue to influence us as learners and leaders in education.
Access this curated collection of our top 102 books for building a powerful culture of collaboration by going to bit.ly/102 reads. That's bit.ly/102 reads.
We hope you enjoy this curated list. And now back to our conversation.
The beautiful thing about the Catalyst mindsets is you can use it to diagnose and understand your culture. Do we have
Right.
a culture of belonging? Do we have a culture of seeking relevance in change? Right. So I've run lots of workshops in my academy for not only coaches and leaders, I've run a few workshops for teachers too. And when I run teacher workshops, I require that leaders are in the room.
Yeah.
I'm not doing any work with teachers that leaders aren't doing it, because it has to be a cultural shift, right? Us as a culture, we have to value mindset, right? It's value mindset. By the way, I find this so interesting when I'm doing work with coaches and leaders versus teachers. The mindset's the same,
Yeah.
but the frameworks are different.
Hmm.
And so the coaches and leaders, we look at what brings value to adults. And so I have a framework for that. It's what gives tasks value, right? And then when we look at teachers, what brings relevance and value to lessons,
Yeah.
right? How do we help students find value in our lessons, which is a slightly different thing to look at, right? Because
Yeah.
andragogy, adult learning, is different than pedagogy, right? Children's learning. And so we need to really be mindful of both. So what I love about this framework is we can diagnose both our culture as well as individuals. And I love to think about it as tier one. Tier one, the whole staff, right? And that's culture, right? What does the whole staff need? We can look at all the mindsets. Tier two, what do small groups need? Like, does second grade not get along? Are they struggling with belonging mindset? And then tier three, that one teacher, right? That one teacher that the kids can't do it teacher,
Yeah.
right? Are they struggling with success mindset? Do they not believe the children can be successful in this change?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so many, it's so interesting to be able to use that framework, but the consistency of those mindsets, but using it in different ways, in different settings, and for different purposes.
I really like to that it's so funny, and we see this all the time, especially as people move from classroom teachers to maybe to
Leadership
coaches,
positions.
leadership positions,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and that of sometimes when I'm leading the learning, so in my own classroom, these are things that I would expect of students. But sometimes when I get into a space where I'm being led as a staff member, I don't adopt them the other way necessarily, or I see it in two different ways.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think I was talking about this the other day, actually. I think, and I'm constantly looking at why is resistance happening?
Ah,
And I think one of the big mistakes we make is we treat people the way we want to be treated instead of treating them how they want to be treated.
yeah.
And we, as leaders, right? You leaders, beautiful leaders that you are listening. I'm sure you were great in the classroom. There's a reason why you got promoted to leadership,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? And the mistake is when we assume or think people should be like us or think like us.
Yeah.
There is a group of people that do. That's beautiful. I'm sure actually you're most effective with them. But there's a whole group of people that think differently than you, right? And so when we treat people the way we want to be treated, we're only impacting a small group of people and not
Hmm.
everyone, right? And so I have something called the expectation continuum, and it's us shifting from the shoulds to support. And so looking at if we're supporting someone, what is that? That's I have an expectation and I'm getting curious about how I could support you. The shoulds are different. The shoulds are I have an expectation for you, but there's some kind of value judgment with it. I
Mm.
think you are good or bad, whether you do that thing. The expectation's the same. We're not lowering our expectations, right? But if I sit in my shoulds, and I like to say we're shoulding everywhere and making a mess,
Yeah.
we're shoulding on ourselves, we're shoulding on other people. It's very messy. But when we do that, it keeps us stuck in making a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, Becca, when you think about getting started and moving from that compliance-driven culture to one that is more human-centered, as you speak about, how do people get started? How do leaders
Oh
and
gosh.
district and school leaders get started? And even what are some of those small steps that they could take
Mhm.
toward it?
I love it. I'd say the first step is leaders, you want to look at yourself and really name what are your shoulds, because shoulds are actually a form of resistance. And what we resist persists. What we don't realize is when we are resisting the resistance, we are actually keeping the very thing around we don't want to be there.
Mm,
And so
hmm.
we have to look at if we are operating on top of our shoulds, it's what I call putting icing on a mud pie. We are pretending like we're okay when we're actually not. And
Yeah.
so nothing else will be highly effective if we don't take care of our root cause of our own resistance. And so naming our shoulds and shifting, by the way, shoulds are statements and support are questions, right?
So give us an
So
example of what a should
yeah,
might be for a leader.
The teacher should come prepared during their for their PLCs.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, I hear that one all the time. And the question can become, how can I be proactive and support the teachers in being prepared. The
Mhm.
expectation is the same. I'm
Mm,
not going to lower the bar and be like, well, they're just not prepared. No, no, no. You're going to show up prepared. I'm going to send you an email the day before reminding you, hey, bring your laptop, bring your notebook, and bring your lesson plans.
Yeah,
Right? I'm going to highlight that stuff. And then the day of, I'm going to be like, hey, looking forward to seeing you in PLC. Remember, bring your laptop, bring that stuff. Right? And I'm
yeah.
going to try all these different ways to support people and actually having it happen.
absolutely. We often talk about naming things explicitly
Mhm,
together, co-creating
mhm,
that, so that
mhm,
if we say, all right, showing up prepared, that's something that we think is important for
Hmm.
us. Let's have a conversation. Why? Why do we believe? And again,
Why
that's
is it
shifting
important to
that
us?
mhm,
from me to we. Why do
mhm,
we believe that is important? And okay, let's talk about what would it look like if we showed up prepared, and how will that help us? The like getting to that root cause of the why. All of
mhm,
a sudden, the person who goes, I don't see what the big deal is,
mhm.
can start to understand, okay, this makes sense that if I'm not prepared, then I'm wasting other people's time, and that I understand how that can be frustrating.
Yeah. And often the reason why people are unprepared is because they don't value that time and it's
Yeah,
value mindset. And I love it. You very naturally bring relevance.
yeah,
Why is this important? That's bringing relevance.
Hmm.
yeah, love it.
Yeah,
Okay, so finally, you talk about coaching the whole educator, and
yeah.
yeah, you have a podcast around
I
that as
do.
well. Awesome.
I do. Yeah.
So, um, the whole educator, not just the role they play. So, what
Yeah.
does that look like in practice, and how then can leaders sustain that approach over time without, well, burning
Mhm.
themselves out?
Yeah, 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 for sure. There's a few things I think about. One is, right, I shared earlier, there's a human-centered approach. And what's surprising is when we take the time, so this is we either can be proactive with stuff and take the time on the front end, or we can be
Yeah.
reactive and keep making the same mistakes over and over again, putting a
Yeah.
band-aid on
Which will
symptoms.
cost more time.
Yeah.
For sure. And frustration and teacher turnover, right?
Yeah.
Let me talk about when we operate with the human in front of us. What it looks like is I spend the time to understand my humanity and you understand your own humanity, right? And so we one of the things I've been saying lately is connection is the shortest distance to coachability.
Mm.
If someone
Mhm.
feels connected to me, they will
Gonna
turn
happen
from
fast.
resisting to what do you want me to do? I
Yeah.
mean, it is almost makes your head spin like,
Yeah.
whoa, what just happened? You were refusing to even meet with me, and now you're just asking me, just tell me. So it's kind of wild, right? And so
Yeah.
so one is understanding, like self-awareness, right? I understand my humanity and I understand you're human. I may not fully understand you. And to not only use the catalyst mindsets to start asking questions, we need to stop making so many statements about people and
Mhm.
start asking questions. And then the question is, and don't be snarky with those questions. Why wouldn't you just show up on time? No, no, no. But sometimes it's the judgment sneaks in there. It does with me too, right? We want to show up curiously and use those catalyst mindsets to ask questions. I wonder if they don't
Mhm.
find value. I wonder if they don't believe they can be successful, right? So show up asking questions. I had a wonderful coach a few months ago share with me that a teacher was felt overwhelmed with the time management of
Mhm.
of of teaching.
Yeah.
And so she said, Becca, I was about to go in and help her manage her time and give her time management strategies. But then I stopped and I asked her some questions and I found out she didn't find the change meaningful. She said, why are we even doing this for our kids? If she hadn't done that, she would have put icing on the mud pie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She would have given her time management strategies. She would have been frustrated because the teacher still wouldn't have done it. And we would have been right. So if we are helping teachers and it's not working, we want to continue to ask questions because we haven't hit the root cause.
Mhm.
And the
Hmm.
second thing, when I'm thinking about burnout, one of the things I talk with coaches about and leaders about is time management,
Mhm.
right? Like there is so much to do in our schools.
Yeah.
And so I want to return back to thinking about our schools in terms of tier one. What does everyone need support in to reach our school goals? I always bring it back to the school goals. We align our coaching and our leadership with the school. We're going in
Yeah.
this direction,
Yeah.
right? Because we say this is valuable. We're measuring what we find valuable. So what does the whole school need? with tier one support, right? And then run a whole staff meeting. Don't go coaching one-on-one, everyone,
Yeah.
right? What do the small groups need? Does social studies need help understanding the difference between a standard and an objective? Go and work. Don't do a whole staff meeting for what just social studies team needs, right?
Mhm.
And then what do individuals need?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's interesting with that, Becca. I'd written an article on this years ago. The idea that, of course, I need to at times support individuals as a
Mhm,
leader, and like you're talking about the tiering, that tier three. Of course, that needs to happen. But I found the greatest value was when I could be working with teams. So
mhm,
when teams would be coming together and really focused, intentional teams that were working
Mhm.
on things in relation to the school goals, like you said, I found that if I could join those teams, now I'm interacting and working with 3 to 6 people at a
mhm,
time. You're constantly modeling what
Mhm.
it is
mhm,
that we would want to see, asking, like you said, asking questions, but in that group. And then I found that the group started to support and help one another. And again, I wasn't referring it to as mindsets, but that's what we were
mhm,
doing. We were
mhm.
reinforcing these mindsets, but I found I could do that more effectively when working with smaller teams. The whole staff was effective too, but there were times I couldn't quite get the connection that I wanted that you talk about in that larger group of 30 to 40 people. But in the smaller teams, I could really feel an impact being made.
And it sounds like possibly the different teams needed something slightly different. I
Oh,
think
they
often
did.
when we have that sense of like, the whole staff does need this, but we need to do this in small groups. And I think a thing that we're sensing sometimes, but aren't necessarily naming is each of them actually needs something slightly different. They need it to be implemented in a slightly different way or debriefed in a slightly different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't think it's either or. Too
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well, because with
Yeah.
the full group, we need to be able to establish common language, common
Hmm.
understanding,
Hmm.
everyone receiving that same messaging, especially around our school goals and where we're going. But being able to have that full team approach, but then
Hmm.
as teams split off into smaller groups, understanding that for sure different teams require different things depending on the makeup of that group,
Mhm.
and then individuals will need different as well, or possibly different as well, just depending on the people you have. So it's about being able to have that broad approach all across your school. It's all of those things that work together to take you there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And
So,
as you were talking, for some reason, trust kept coming up in my head.
yeah.
I don't know why. I was like, trust, trust, trust. So, and I think just a foundational thing. And
Yeah.
trust, I do have trust as part of belonging mindset. At the end of the day, not much of this will actually be effective if people don't trust you.
Yeah.
Now,
Mhm.
what's cool
Yeah.
about trust is there's this thing called provisional trust. Some people will actually, when they meet you, will give you what's called provisional trust. They will say, hey, I'm going to trust you. You could break it, but I'm going to actually trust you upon meeting you. And it's your job as a leader to continue to build on that trust.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just, as you were talking, I was just like, you know what? Not much of this will be very effective if we don't have trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Becca, would love to come back then. When you're thinking about the catalyst mindsets, what
Mhm.
advice would you give a leader who's trying to utilize those mindsets to build or sustain a really robust culture of collaboration in their school or even
I
their
love it.
their organization? We'll be right back to continue this episode. It doesn't take long for any teacher to realize that explicit expectations and routines are necessary for a large group of students to engage in meaningful activity, regardless of what they teach. Although we recognize this is true for any classroom, we don't always take the same care to design careful expectations and routines for adults. We establish a time to meet and clarify a purpose, then bring team members together. Since we are all adults, there is no need for rules of engagement, but very quickly we discover, just like in the classroom, dysfunctions within the team will persist, such as coming late, checking phones consistently, working on sending emails throughout the meeting, along with many others. So, how do we guard against this happening? The easy answer is we need to co develop team norms. Download our free Guide for Leaders to Develop, Sustain, and Reinforce Effective Norms for Team Success. This guide provides you with step-by-step instructions on how to develop your team norms. Access the guide at bit.ly/team norms guide. That's bit.ly/team norms guide. Norms provide the essential foundation for our teams to commit to working together, reflecting on what each team member needs to be successful and leading to the articulation of an agreed upon set of guidelines assist us when working effectively as a team. And now back to our conversation.
Yeah, and I think thinking about the whole, right, if we're talking about school culture, right? I would think about it in a couple different ways. One is look at everyone's behavior, right? That's the thing. We don't know people's intentions. We do know their behavior.
Yeah.
We do know our own intentions. One of my favorite quotes is we judge people by their behavior and ourselves by our intentions. Right. And so look at people's behaviors, not what you assume their intentions are, right? Sometimes I hear, I just can't make that teacher care. It's like, hold on. You don't know they don't care. Hold on. You do know they have certain behaviors. So I think looking at as a culture, what are behaviors that we like? What are desirable behaviors that are really working at our school? And then what are behaviors that are undesirable, right? What do we want to change? And then asking ourselves, and I would gather the leadership team, ask ourselves, what is unsupported here? Is it value mindset? They don't find the changes relevant, meaningful, purposeful. Is it belonging mindset? They don't actually experience belonging here. And one of the things, like I said, the conditions for belonging is trust, connection, and safety, psychological safety. This is a super important distinction. One of the things that I say often is just because you think you're trustworthy doesn't mean they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I think I'm trustworthy, right? And it's just to not assume that someone else feels the same way I do, because then if I do, I'm going into my shoulds.
Yeah.
Well, you should trust me,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, no, what is actually happening right now? So asking ourselves, like, does our staff feel safe to question things, make mistakes, right? Suggest other ideas, new ideas, right?
Yeah.
Belonging mindset. Um, do they experience a sense of ownership? And what ownership is actually, this is wild. When I was like digging into the research and I was deep into it, ownership is actually the other four mindsets. To have ownership, you need the other four mindsets and a sense of agency, external,
Mm-hmm.
environmental, and internal. And one of the things I like to share with school leaders is asking yourself, just because teachers actually do have agency in something, do they know that transparently?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times our beautiful teachers, they feel they need permission for things they actually don't need permission
Yeah.
for. And they hold themselves back like, am I allowed to do that? Right. So I just say to school leaders, look, be super transparent about what they're
Yeah.
allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And don't go into your shoulds. Don't
Yeah.
assume they should know that they're allowed to do something. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other mindset, success mindset, do they actually believe they can be successful? That's a sneaky one. An interesting thing, the research shows self-efficacy, this is not surprising, is actually a foundation of all the mindsets.
Yeah.
And so I was like, ooh, isn't that interesting? If I don't believe I can be successful, none of the others are really going to be
Really
helpful.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's a foundation. Um, and then growth mindset, right? Do they actually believe they can improve? And it's just a distinction between those two things. Growth mindset is the process. So it's do I believe that I'm safe to take
Mm-hmm.
risks and be messy and fail forward in the process of trying new things? Do I
Mm-hmm.
believe I'm going to be embarrassed by it or even punished? And then success mindset is outcome clarity plus attainability belief. You're like getting me real deep into this now,
Yeah.
but it's do like, here we go, buckle up. So success mindset is about the outcome. Do I believe the outcome can actually happen? So
Yeah.
I could believe I could improve. I could believe like, oh, I embrace the mess, but I could also believe I won't actually achieve the desired result. And
Right.
one of the thing one of the things about success mindset is, and I work with school leaders a lot about this. I always ask them, do the teachers at the school know your definition of good teaching?
Yeah.
If you said what makes good teaching and learning in a classroom,
Yeah.
would they say something similar to you? Because that's outcome clarity. Are we in agreement on what success looks like, on what good or great looks like?
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times
Absolutely.
that's actually the misconception that one teacher's like a silent, compliant classroom is successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another teacher's like, embrace the mess, inquiry, self-student driven learning, right? And both could be considered successful, but us
Yep.
as a school, we have to come together and be
Yeah.
super clear on what success actually looks like.
Well, now you're speaking our language because this is part of what
Oh,
we
very.
do
Mhm.
is working with schools to create that common understanding of, what are our tier one practices and what
Mhm.
are the non-negotiables across our school that we
Mhm.
would see in every classroom, understanding that that's not about making a cookie cutter, but it's
Mhm.
about being able
Yeah.
to create that foundation that is true, very good practice and
Mhm.
pedagogy and that will help us to create that foundation from classroom to classroom, but just providing that clarity of what is it that we all have in common, even though we have different teaching styles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love this, Becca. So, if anyone wanted to learn more, Becca, to
Yeah.
get in touch with you, go
Yeah.
ahead, share with us your podcast, your website.
Yeah.
How do people find Becca Silver to have
I
these
love it.
conversations?
So my podcast is called Coaching the Whole Educator, and it's very much coaching and leadership minded.
Mhm.
Um, my website's thewholeeducator.com, and I'm active on social media quite a bit. So The Whole Educator on Instagram. I'm at Becca Silver on LinkedIn. I'd say those are the best. And feel free to just email me directly, Becca at thewholeeducator.com. I'd love to hear from folks, even like what you got from this from this session. But yeah, no, I'm very available for, come connect with me, let me know, give me feedback. I love it all. And if folks are wanting kind of a one pager or some more
Mm,
resources around the Catalyst mindset, I have a one pager in the programs section um, of my website, and I have a free ebook and a fun quiz, which helps leaders diagnose which catalyst mindsets need the most support in their team. And once you take the quiz, you get emailed the ebook to start to learn more
excellent.
about which catalyst mindsets need most support.
Oh,
Oh,
love it.
that's
We will make
beautiful.
sure that ends up in the show notes here as well. Becca, it has been a pleasure having the chance to connect with you and to learn more about the Catalyst mindsets. Really, really great work.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing your passion and all of the work that you do that are highly impacting schools.
Thank you so much. I've loved being here with you.
Wishing you all the best. I'm always interested when we can talk to somebody about their framework,
Mm.
their way of thinking, the program, whatever it is that they've gone to capture, how they go and work or support leaders. It's always fascinating when you can hear things where you're going, oh yeah, we talk about that too, or we think in
Yeah.
some of those ways, but there's just little nuance shifts. So when she's talking about the what are the shoulds that
Yeah.
we would see or statements, I get drawn back to other ways of thinking, such as Dufour's idea of loose tight leadership
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um, getting really clear on not, she talked about we have to name our shoulds so that we're not living on assumptions. And we talk about that all the time
Yeah.
of make things clear. Don't ride on assumptions or just, well, I told them they should
Hmm.
know this already.
Well, I love that idea of the continuum of should at what end, and then that idea of support. So how do we move from those statements of what everyone should do
Yeah.
to that frame of support? And then she took it one more step to say, and when we are talking about support, it comes about through questions. And
Yeah.
we know how powerful questions are, that instead of making a statement to someone, framing it as a question so that you're inviting them into that conversation or inviting them into that decision making. And that is totally different than what you should do.
But I could see myself as a leader working through, like when I'm encountering resistance, and I'm air quoting that here if you're listening to the audio version. When you encounter that and you're getting perhaps frustrated, I love the idea of thinking through the mindsets of, okay, is it possible that this person doesn't have a sense, feel like they belong
Yeah.
in the group? Is it possible that they don't feel like they're owning some of the work? Is it possible that they don't see it as value? Like when you talk about asking questions, I think I would be asking them internally first, reflecting on
Yeah.
what could be this. And then I love the idea of, all right, what could be something that I could do to support? And again, it's when we're thinking about leading cultures of collaboration, let's always turn back first and say,
Yeah.
okay, but what could I do
Reflection
to
on
help?
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What could I do? Or maybe what am I not doing that I
Hmm.
could in order to support this behavior? I mean, Michael Fullen talked about this all the time of behaviors before beliefs.
Yeah.
I can influence and impact behaviors. It's much harder to influence or impact beliefs.
Yeah. And the foundation of all of that is having a solid enough understanding and wherewithal to move into those questions so that you can explore what are those unmet needs. And that's basically what she was working toward, is within that, what are the root causes of the resistance to change? Because there is something behind that. And I think there's so many parallels to what we do in
Yeah.
classrooms here too. Is when we work with teachers around behavior, then it's let's wait a minute, let's pause and try to figure out what is behind that behavior,
Yeah. What's
because
at the
that
root?
behavior is just a communication. Well, this is very much a parallel that when we have people who are resistant to moving forward, I think it's first a reflection on yourself. Okay, what
Mhm.
am I doing that is getting in the way, or am I leading this in a way that is just pushing people as opposed to bringing people along on the side through
Mhm.
that questioning? Or do we really think about how do we move people forward in a way that we do that together and
Yeah.
collaboratively?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a great reminder from Becca. I wrote it down here that, again, as a leader, are you in the room?
Yeah.
You need to be in the room. And I think the great way to not get overwhelmed with that is to be thinking critically, what rooms do I need to be
Mm,
in? And what I mean by that is, are there teams meeting that I need to be a part
yeah.
of? I can't be in everything, but which ones would have the most impact on where we're trying to go in our with our goals or priorities. Critically important. And then
Yeah.
if I'm not, how can I help support the work that's happening in that room as well? I think that's a great question to be reflecting on for what rooms do I need? And when I say rooms, I'm not talking classrooms necessarily. I'm talking spaces.
Yeah.
What spaces and with who do I need to be a part of?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So really love this conversation with Becca and encourage you to visit our website, learn more about the Catalyst mindset as well. Love to thank her for joining the podcast, sharing expertise. Please make sure to check out the notes and visit the website. Check out the Coaching the Whole Educator podcast. We also have a couple of requests. First, please share or join our mailing list at jlinsiders.com. We send out weekly content and resources that we know you'll find valuable. Secondly, please like, share, review, subscribe. It helps us to continue to grow the show and allows people to discover this conversation with Becca and other thought leaders that we have a chance to connect with. Finally, please don't hesitate to reach out at questions at Jigsaw Learning. If you have a question, a future topic you'd like to explore, if you'd just like to connect. We've also just established a new section of our website. If you go to jigsawlearning.ca/free, we have a number of free resources, webinars, all collected in one space. If you're looking for guides for how to create norms, looking for how to get started with the collaborative response work, a webinar on what are layers of teams that we need to understand and what do they look like in school, it's all there for you. So that's jigsawlearning.ca/free. So with that, we'll once again close off this podcast and wishing you all the best as you endeavor to build a culture of collaboration in your organization.
See you soon.
Jigsaw Learning, founded by Curtis and Lorna Hewson, is a team of educators who work with schools, districts, and educational leaders to establish collaborative response to ensure success for all students. Because every child deserves a team.